Hello, today we are going to learn about manifest destiny. Let's take a look at those two words real quick. Your destiny is something you believe is going to happen to you, a good thing usually. A destiny is usually a positive, like you are destined to become something great. The manifest part means it's becoming real. That destiny is no longer just something out there in the future, but it's actually taking place and it's happening if it's a manifest destiny. Well, this story is about America's destiny. Americans believe it was our destiny to have all the land from sea to shining sea, and that's becoming real in the middle 1800s. So, this is about how America fulfilled its destiny of acquiring the continent from sea to shining sea. You probably know what seas we're talking about. Raise your hand if you know which ocean is located here on America's East Coast. All right, very good. The Atlantic. Again, raise your hand if you know what ocean is out here on our west coast. Yeah, just shout it out. Just tell me, what is it? Yeah, exactly. The Pacific Ocean. So we're acquiring land from sea to shining sea. How did America go from 13 colonies over there on the East Coast to all 50 current states and our current territory of the United States? Well, that's what Manifest Destiny is all about. Manifest Destiny is the spirit of expansion that really excited a lot of Americans in the 1840s. The term came from a newspaperman who said it's our manifest destiny to overspread the continent, believing it was kind of a God-given duty for the Americans to control all of North America. So our stories are, we've already learned about some of letter A and letter B. We're going to add the letters C, D, and E sections to the country. And as we accomplish our destiny, we'll add letters F, letter G, letter H, letter I, letter J, and letter K. So let's look at those stories very briefly. We've talked about Robert Gast's painting American Progress. You see his name presented differently in different places, where we have the idea of manifest destiny from an 1870s painting. Columbia, the goddess of discovery, is bringing the light and civilization and business and commerce of the East Coast and bringing it to the West Coast, forcing away the darkness, the danger, the storms, the tribes, the buffalo herds. She is bringing the rugged pioneers, the Pony Express, gold miners, farmers, transportation, communication, the telegraph lines, and business from the east. We are overspreading the continent. And that's how America's mindset of manifest destiny was in the middle 1800s. The original United States was this kind of off-white area here. We know that story from the American Revolution, starting with 13 British colonies along the coast, but eventually at the end of the Revolution, um, having territory the whole way up to the Mississippi River. So that's our original United States. We have talked about how we have purchased Louisiana for $15 million for all this orange area, a really great deal. President Jefferson purchased it for $15 million from the French, sent Lewis and Clark, plus others, out there to explore it and see what we've actually bought. You haven't really heard of too many of those other explorers, but maybe you've heard of Zebulon Pike. Pikes Peak in Colorado is named for him. We don't need to spend a lot of time with letters C, D, and E. We've purchased pieces of Florida at different times, some of them through treaties with the Spanish, some through war, a war that many people would say is not justified, not a good war, where Andrew Jackson and the United States Army are invading Florida, which was then owned by Spain, to chase down Native Americans, in particular the Seminole tribe. Florida State University still refers to themselves as the Seminoles, even though most universities have gone away from using Native American names or imagery for their teams or their logos or mascots. Well, maybe it's a good thing that we have Florida because that's where the mouse is. And some of you have probably been to see the mouse, Mickey Mouse. His first cartoon, Steamboat Willie, that started the trend and the building of all the Disney properties in Florida and other places as well. Some of our story today and this week will be how we get Texas. Americans leaving America moved into Texas, which was Mexican territory at the time, eventually getting tired of Mexican rule, having a revolution just like the American Revolution, and eventually Texas became an independent country. It wanted to join the United States right away, but Texas wanted to be slave. plenty of opposition in the United States to adding new slave territory to the country. So it took about 9 years for Texas to actually become part of the United States. When there was a president who was in favor of adding new slave territory to the country, Texas was able to join. Texas today doesn't look quite like the shape you see here on the map, but that's what it was at first. So that's one of our stories about how we're going to accomplish manifest destiny, is how we get Texas. Also, we'll spend some time with how we get the Oregon country, what is now America's Northwest. This will become our Northwest. What about the old Northwest that was in this area? Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. Well, that's not our Northwest anymore. So to make it as confusing as possible, we'll call this the old Northwest, and this is our new Northwest. We'll also spend some time with the mountain men, the first Americans to live out here permanently, hunting and trapping small animals and selling their fur to become coats, hats, gloves, and things that were very trendy in America, but especially in Europe in the middle 1800s. Today, we have an animal rights movement that would probably stop a lot of that from happening. But there was no animal rights movement in the 1840s, so mountain men were quite a sensation, just like today's movie stars or sports figures would be. We'll spend some time with this area called the Mexican Cession. Mexico is not very happy that Texas joined the United States. There's a dispute over where the border should be between Mexico and the United States. So a war breaks out in 1845, primarily over who owns what land down here and where the border should be. The United States wins that war, although, again, it's an unpopular war in a lot of ways. In fact, a young member of Congress kind of dares the president to say, where did actually the Mexican army fight Americans? Where did they actually kill Americans? Show us the spot. We don't believe it. We think it's just a way to add more slave territory to the country. Well, that young member of Congress started to build a name for himself. People started to recognize the name Abraham Lincoln for his opposition to the Mexican War. Either way, America wins the war. We gain all this land from Mexico as a result. About the time they're signing the peace treaties to finish the war and transfer the land, gold is discovered here in California. And that'll lead us to a really great story about the California gold rush. If we were in face-to-face school this week, we would do a simulation of the California gold rush. Hopefully you and your gold mining group would strike it rich. Maybe you would become very wealthy in the California gold rush. Unfortunately, we're just not able to do those things right now. Let's add just a couple of more pieces to our United States to accomplish our manifest destiny. The Gadsden Purchase is a little strip of land we bought down here because we wanted to build a railroad across from the United States into California. If we built it further north, the Rocky Mountains would be in the way, and that would be very difficult. So we bought some land down here that's much flatter, although it's desert, and that presents its own set of problems for railroad building. The Gadsden Purchase cost $30 million. Is that an outrage? Is that a scandal? We paid $15 million for all of this. Why are we spending $30 million just for this little tiny piece? We actually thought that was a fair price. Just goes to show you what an incredible deal the Louisiana Purchase was. $15 million for all of that, when we thought $30 million for this was a fair price. Let's just add Alaska and Hawaii. They're not really part of what we do in our class, but it does, not part of Manifest Destiny, but it does kind of finish how we have all of our land that we currently have. After our Civil War, we purchased Alaska from Russia. A lot of Americans weren't happy about it. $7 million, a lot of money. And we don't really know what's up there, and we don't know what we're going to gain from owning all that. Well, today there's oil there, and so we have quite a financial windfall from that. But we buy Alaska. We also are going to get Hawaii as a result of beating the Spanish in a war called the Spanish-American War. Hawaii didn't really want to join the United States. King Kamehameha was the last of the Hawaiian kings. So here I am with two of our EHMIS students a couple of years ago, Morgan and Caitlin. We're in Washington, D.C. in the United States Visitor Center, United States Capitol Visitor Center, in front of King Kamehameha's statue. Every state has been allowed to send 2 statues of important people of their state to the Capitol building. One of Hawaii's is King Kamehameha. The tradition about King Kamehameha is he is not allowed to have anything over his head. And so there's a skylight directly above him, which the natural daylight's coming in. So that continues that Hawaiian tradition that nothing is allowed to be above King Kamehameha's head. Maybe you've seen this TV show, Hawaii Five-0. The original version of the show was on in the 1960s and 70s. There's been a more modern version of it, and you see the poster for it here, which just ended a 10-year run. Hawaii Five-0 is a police task force. If you've seen the show, their building is where their headquarters are is this building, and King Kamehameha's statue is in front of that building as well. All of this is about how America accomplished its manifest destiny. How did we acquire all this land from sea to shining sea, from Atlantic to Pacific? And that's what we're learning about this week. We're accomplishing that destiny. What we believe is our destiny to own all that land is becoming real or becoming manifest. My little arrows point to the different parts of land. Somehow they all turned out upside down when I converted this from PowerPoint to Google Slides. But there you go. These are all the different pieces of land we'll be learning about.